Yeah, naturally, Lake Okeechobee really has no southern shore. From the central part of Florida, the water just kind of slowly dribbles south, very, very slowly, and that's the Everglades. The headwater of the Everglades is the Kissimmee River, which flows into Lake Okeechobee. Okeechobee naturally just slowly heads down into the Everglades. In the 1920s, people thought that that was very productive farmland underneath the Everglades. So to drain it, a dike was built around Lake Okeechobee, and instead of being allowed to flow south, the water is dumped in the east coast along the St.Lucie River, and on the west coast, the Caloosahatchee River. In the 1940s, a much more complicated system was created called the Central and South Florida Flood Control District. Most of the canals that we now see when you're driving along were built here in the 1940s, the Flood Control District. This is an ambitious, enormous project of dikes, pumps, and levees. And what this means is that every summer, the Caloosahatchee and the St.Lucie receive discharges from Lake Okeechobee so that its level stays low. Enormous quantities of fresh water and muck are dumped onto these small, fragile coastal estuaries. It's a very complicated issue. There are a lot of interests at stake: agriculture, environmentalists, the business community. There's a lot of money at stake. There's a lot of politicians who have an investment in it. So the long story short is, it's complicated. It was a complicated system to build. It will be a very complicated system to unbuild and to replumb. There are a lot of vested interests, and you'll hear a lot of opinions arguing what the solution is. Is there a solution at all?
My vision of the future is to stop these influences that we have through the agricultural canals primarily and the releases from Lake Okeechobee into our waterways. We feel there's a better way to put that water from the lake south to the Everglades, to store it, treat it, and convey it or move it south where the Everglades needs it, and stop discharging or releasing it to these coastal estuaries that don't need it. We have a natural tributaries and estuaries of the North Fork and South Fork, which are natural runoff areas. So we know that it gets a little fresher during the wet season, a little saltier during the dry season, but that's the natural changes. And so my vision is to really see it stop all of our influences, major influences that we've built over the years, these canals and major runoff issues, and store and treat that water so it doesn't run off into the system, and let the system be itself. Let the estuary recover to whatever level it can as an estuary.
First off, my name's Sonny Stein, Stein Sugar Farms. I'm a fourth generation farmer in the Everglades agriculture area. We face all kind of issues, here in the Glades. Our family came here in 1914 and started farming, and progressed from truck farming to cattle industry and then the sugarcane industry. A hot topic nowadays is the pollution in the St.Lucie River and the toxic algae coming down. They blame it on the sugar industry. If you see here on this map, the flow to the lake comes down from Orlando and the Kissimmee River Valley, which is the Kissimmee River comes into the lake, which is phosphate mines up here in Hardee County and all. So and cattle pastures and all, which bringing phosphorus in here. But that's a lot of people in Orlando and a lot of acres coming into Lake Okeechobee. But to say that the sugar industry is, responsible for the green algae, I kind of have a hard time agreeing with that.
In my opinion, the greatest ones to blame are big agriculture. And I don't like to point the finger, but I've read a lot, I've studied a lot. My grandfather comes from agriculture. It's part of our heritage. It's important. But, after the 60s, 70s, agriculture changed in this country, and it was no longer small farms with small people. It's turned into agribusiness on a scale that you would not believe. And I've seen it. I've flown down there, I've walked through their tours. It's impressive in that, we've got to feed the world. But on the other hand, it's kind of frightening to me because it's just a complete rape and pillage of the environment, basically, if I'm truthful. I mean, they're, flying airplanes and dumping pesticides and fungicides and fertilizers, and they're just producing as fast as they can. And unfortunately, the sugar industry in our state, Florida, is completely blocking the water between Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades. And that's why we receive the water that we do into our St. Lucie River, Indian River Lagoon, and the Caloosahatchee on the other side.
We're stuck. Our only solution for the discharges here and the Caloosahatchee is to send the water south. And of course, they will tell you that the 10 parts per billion is absolutely impossible to meet. What they won't, including water management and our state government, will not tell you is they send more than 1 million acre-feet a year. Over the last 5 years, averaged at 9 parts per billion into the Everglades National Park. So the water can be cleaned. The problem is we don't have enough volume in our water conservation areas and in our storm treatment areas to cleanse the amount of water that can get deposited upon the watershed. The watershed of the Everglades runs all the way to Shingle Creek in Orlando. And one of the big polluters up there, by the way, is SeaWorld, with chlorine and mammal poop in the water. So it all gets loaded up with water. Look at our own watershed right here, for instance. The St. Lucie had about 120,000 acres of natural watershed. In 1944, if you look at aerials of this area, all of Port St. Lucie was a wetland. All of this was a wetland. The only places that were dry were the Atlantic Coastal Ridge and the ridge out there where 95 is, and then there's another 2 ridges in between us and Okeechobee. Our water never mingled from here to there. Right about Vero, it goes into the St. John's, and right about Vero, it starts moving south. But it never went east. It always went south or north. And now they've cut through all of that to drain all the fields. We have citrus and cattle, and what is probably worse, sod being grown out there. King Ranch is in the sod business on C-44 in a big way. Go on Google and look. It's impressive. And of course, that is all chemically intensive stuff because they're not, and I don't know that I can blame them. I think there's enough profit to be made that they don't have to pollute, that they could suck it up and lower their profit and still make a handy handful of money. But they don't see it that way because there's not farmers out there anymore. It's corporate organizations running farms as an industry. Monocrops, and all they care about is the bottom line. And that's the way America does business. Make your buck.
Politicians are always corrupt, and you're at that high level, and it's just hard because money talks, and that's just kind of what's happened to our state. But if these people could see and understand and believe in and fight for the Everglades and water going south and replenishing that aquifer, not only for the Everglades, but for the people of South Florida, and taking it away from Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie to save those areas, it would just make sense. And they could figure things out. There's a lot of smart people out there, and there's ways to do it. I am aiding in Harbor Branch's research. I'm Dolphin Ecology Project, and my data is super intensive in the southern Indian River Lagoon, which is actually the area where the bottlenose dolphins here are probably most critically, looked at right now because of, I think because of the discharges. We have to just find out what's happening because there's so many pollutants coming in the river. Let's find out, are they dying off? Are they moving? Well, no, they're not dying off. Who's to say in 20 years if they're going to be toxic waste or not? But they do not move. They do travel the lagoon. These dolphins here, the resident dolphins, go to Central Lagoon. But this is their home. They've been here for years. This is their home, and they stay here. They don't even go out in the ocean. So I want people to understand these dolphins in their backyard are resident dolphins. They live here. They have families, and you know, I that's what I really want to convey mostly.
Well, it's funny. When I started working on this book, I was living in Washington. My idea of the outdoors was playing tennis. I stumbled into it as a news story. I was writing about the Army Corps of Engineers, and they helped destroy the Everglades, and now they're in charge of fixing it. So it just struck me as an interesting story. But I've definitely come to appreciate it, not just as kind of an amazing piece of nature that you don't see anywhere else, and as kind of economic engine for Florida that has my drinking water sitting right underneath it, but as this real kind of test case for man and nature in the world, right? It's really kind of a test of whether, after this abusive relationship we've had with nature for all these years, whether we're going to be able to make amends. So it's just a great story, and it's become a model for ecosystem restorations around the rest of the world.
An average person all of us can really do our part by, it sounds repetitive, but recycling, reusing, not fertilizing near the waterfront areas, going to meetings, talking to legislatures and people that need to hear from us as citizens. Even though we're just an individual, they know that there's a lot more people that have the same opinion we do about the issue. So we need to voice it. We need to be at these meetings or write a letter to the state legislators or congressmen and really voice our opinion strongly about why we need to protect these waters and clean them up.
And so I started getting rid of my grass. I got rid of my Floritan grass. Not all of it. I left some of it for my dogs, but overall I got rid of about 85% of the grass in my yard, and I did that by expanding my beds. Like a bed that has plants in it. So you're slowly making that larger, and you have to read and you have to learn what plants look good and make it so you're using, they don't have to be native necessarily, but Florida friendly, that don't require as much fertilizer, don't require as much water. And so you try to make your yard as clean as possible. I think that's a good place to start.
All the cliche things really do help. Writing letters to your legislators with your opinions, definitely those things help. Voicing your opinions, attending these big protests and rallies, because one thing that really would help is national media attention to certain problems, like say the toxic algae and what's happening. National media really has some power, and that's when things start happening. So I also think people can obviously not fertilize their lawn and use that fertilizer ordinance that, during the rainy summer months, you don't use a heavy load of nitrogens and phosphorus. That helps. Every little bit helps.
But then the kind of things that you do on any issue that you feel strongly about, where you let your elected representatives know that you care about this stuff, and you try to pressure them to make the choices that are in the interests of the place and not necessarily the special interests.
Get educated. Pay attention. Read the newspaper. Use social media. Learn. Because when it comes time to vote, an uneducated vote is worse than not voting. So, educate yourselves. Get active within your community. I believe that every single person should serve their community in one fashion or another, something that is comfortable to you. And it can start at home with personal responsibility. Sure, ag is the elephant in the room. They really are, but that doesn't mean that we can't do things here at home. In our choices, it will make a difference.